On my engagement day, my family didn't attend. I texted Mom, and she responded, "We're at the beach with your sister." My sister texted, "You'll break up anyway." I said nothing. I just posted a picture of me with a special guest. Mom kept calling. I smiled, turned off my phone, and celebrated. Hey Reddit, I've been sitting on this story for a while, and after everything that's happened, I feel like it's time to share. This is going to be a long one, but trust me, it's worth it. I'm Hannah, 28 years old, and my family has always had this odd dynamic. To outsiders, it probably looked normal. My parents, my older brother, and my younger sister, all living in the same town and doing the usual family things. But behind closed doors? Well, that's where the fun begins. I've always been the one who tried to make peace, the sensible one, the one who would do anything for family, even if it meant putting my own needs last. But over the years, the cracks started to show. My mom, especially, was, well, let's just say she had a way of making everything about her. She wasn't malicious in a way that you could point to and say, this is why she's toxic. It was the small things, the manipulations, the guilt trips, the subtle digs. And when it came to big moments in my life, let's just say my parents' support was about as consistent as a flip of a coin. So when I got engaged to my now fiancé, Caleb, I tried not to let my expectations get too high about my family's involvement. Caleb and I had been together for 3 years. He was kind, stable, and someone who actually understood me. I'd introduced him to my family early on, and while my parents were polite enough, I could tell they didn't think he was good enough for me. To be fair, my mom had a pretty narrow view of what she thought was good enough, and Caleb didn't meet her standards. He wasn't a lawyer or a doctor. He was a software engineer with a bit of a quiet streak. But we were happy, and that's all that mattered to me. Fast forward to engagement day. I had made sure to keep the whole thing relatively low-key. Caleb proposed on a quiet evening at home, in front of the fireplace. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it was perfect for us. The next day, I called my mom to tell her the news. I was beyond excited, but when I shared the news, she didn't respond with the joy I was hoping for. Instead, she sounded distracted, almost annoyed. "Mom, I'm engaged. Caleb asked me last night." "I'm so happy," I said, practically bouncing off the walls. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "That's nice," she said, her tone flat. "But we're at the beach with your sister. It's her birthday weekend, you know." I blinked. This was news to me. First of all, I didn't even know my sister had planned a beach trip for her birthday. And second, the timing was, well, not ideal. "Mom, you know I've been planning this for months. You couldn't even come for a little while?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She sighed. "It's just bad timing, Hannah. You know how it is." I had heard that phrase 1,000 times before. "You know how it is" was my mom's go-to excuse for everything. From missing birthdays to skipping family dinners, it was always the same line. I tried to brush it off, telling myself she was probably just stressed, but deep down, it hurt. "Okay," I said, my heart sinking. "I'll talk to you later, I guess." I hung up and tried to focus on the excitement of the day. But as I was scrolling through social media later that evening, I got a text from my sister, Ella. She was 24, and while I loved her, our relationship was complicated. We weren't close, and that's putting it mildly. "You'll break up anyway," the text read. My jaw dropped. What? I stared at the message for a few moments, unsure of how to respond. I wanted to say something back, defend Caleb, tell her how ridiculous she was being, but instead, I did nothing. I just sat there, staring at my phone. The thought of trying to explain myself to my sister felt pointless. She had always been the golden child in my parents' eyes, and anything I did would never be good enough. This was nothing new. But as I sat there, feeling the sting of my family's indifference, a thought occurred to me. Maybe it wasn't just my family who needed to see how happy I was. Maybe I needed to show them how much my life had changed without their approval. And that's when I had an idea. I went to the living room, where Caleb was sitting on the couch, watching TV. "Hey, do you want to take a picture?" I asked him. He looked up at me, puzzled. "A picture of what?" "Of us," I said, smiling. "Just us." He didn't ask questions. Caleb was always good about indulging me when I had these spontaneous ideas. He agreed, and we stood together, arms around each other, as I snapped a few pictures of us looking ridiculously happy. It was then that I posted the photo online, along with a simple caption, celebrating love, no matter what. And then, just to make sure everyone saw it, I turned off my phone. That's when things started to escalate. Mom began calling almost immediately. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Then another. And another. I can't believe you're doing this, Hannah. Why would you do something like this to me? You're my daughter, and this is how you repay me? Her voice cracked through the voicemail. It was the same tone I'd heard countless times before, the one where she tried to guilt-trip me into doing what she wanted. As the night went on, I continued to get calls from my mom. At first, I thought about answering, maybe giving her a piece of my mind, but I quickly realized that would only drag me back into the cycle of her manipulations. I needed a moment of peace, something I hadn't felt in a while. So, I just kept my phone off, focusing on Caleb. He had been understanding from the start, but I could see a hint of concern on his face as the calls kept coming. He didn't want to see me upset. But honestly, I was beyond upset at this point. I was done. I had spent so many years trying to please my family. I'd been over backward for them, attending every holiday, putting up with every comment, every passive-aggressive remark, all in the hopes that they'd one day show up for me, that they'd support me when I needed them the most. But after that phone call with my mom, I knew I had been fooling myself. Around 11 p.m., when Caleb and I were about to head to bed, I finally checked my phone. There were more messages. My mom had sent me 2 more texts, both of them harsh and accusing. This is a joke, right? I can't believe you're choosing him over your family. I'm ashamed of you. I took a deep breath and felt that familiar pit in my stomach. It was a feeling I had grown accustomed to over the years, the deep-seated guilt my mom always seemed to plant in me with her words. But this time, it didn't stick. I felt something different. Anger. And a sense of power I hadn't had in years. I knew what she was doing. She was trying to push my buttons, make me feel guilty enough to apologize, to beg for her approval. She'd done it so many times before. But this time, I wasn't going to give in. This time, I wasn't going to let her manipulate me. I didn't respond to her texts. Instead, I sent one to my sister. The message was short but packed a punch. You're right. We probably will break up. But that's not why I'm posting this. I'm posting it because for the first time, I don't need your approval. I hit send and set my phone on the table. Caleb was in the bathroom, brushing his teeth, and I could hear him humming a song to himself. I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't known I could have. Maybe this wasn't how I had imagined things would go. Maybe I had hoped for my family's approval, their support, but I realized something that night. I didn't need them anymore. Not in the way I thought I did. As I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that things were only going to get worse. My family's behavior had been escalating over the past few years, but now that I had actually made a decision for myself, I knew they were going to fight back harder. My mom especially. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how unhealthy the dynamic had been. But the truth was, this was the first time I wasn't afraid of their anger. In a way, it felt like liberation. The next morning, I woke up to even more messages, this time from both my mom and my sister. My phone was buzzing nonstop as I tried to eat breakfast, but I didn't pick it up. Caleb noticed my hesitance. Do you want to talk about it? He asked gently, sensing the tension. I looked at him, feeling a mixture of gratitude and frustration. It's just them. They're upset. They always are when I make a decision for myself. Caleb sat down beside me, his arm around my shoulders. I get it, but you don't need to deal with it alone, okay? I'm here for you. I gave him a small smile, grateful for his support, but part of me felt the familiar weight of my family's disapproval creeping in again. I hated that it still had this effect on me, but I promised myself I wouldn't let it control me anymore. By noon, I couldn't put it off any longer. I decided to check the messages. There was one from my mom, this time a voicemail. She sounded frantic, desperate even. Hannah, why are you doing this to me? This is supposed to be a time for family. Why do you always have to make things about you? You know how important this trip with your sister is. She's been so upset lately. Why can't you just let me enjoy one moment without causing a scene? I didn't know whether to feel guilty or frustrated. I had heard this kind of manipulative language from her countless times before. She was trying to make me feel like the bad guy for simply living my life. The guilt trip was her go-to move, and she knew how to make it sting. I scrolled past the voicemail and opened a text from Ella. I don't understand you sometimes. Do you really think Caleb is worth all this drama? You're always doing this. You're always acting like you're the victim. Maybe if you actually cared about your family, you'd put us first for once. It stung. It really did. Ella was always the one who seemed to think I was the problem. The one who had no idea how hard I had worked to maintain any semblance of family unity. And now, it seemed like she was on Mom's side. The guilt bubbled up in my chest, but I quickly squashed it down. This was how it always went. I knew my family was going to turn it into something about them, something about their hurt feelings, but I refused to let them derail me again. Instead of responding, I made a decision. I had already done something out of character by posting that picture of Caleb and me. I wasn't going to back down now. The next few days were a whirlwind of texts and missed calls. My mom and Ella didn't give up. In fact, it felt like they were turning up the heat. At first, I tried to ignore it, but it became impossible. It was as if every message and voicemail was a personal attack, trying to make me second-guess myself. One of the messages from my mom made my blood run cold. You're ruining everything, Hannah. You know your father's not well. He's been feeling worse, and you're making this about you. You can't even show up for your family when we need you the most. Do you want to be known as the daughter who abandoned her parents? You're going to regret this. That one hit harder than I care to admit. My dad had been dealing with some health issues for the past year. It wasn't a secret, and I'd been doing my best to help out where I could. But the way my mom phrased it, she made it sound like I was some heartless person who hadn't been supportive. And the guilt she was trying to pile on me, it was suffocating. I knew my mom. She knew how to hit where it hurt, how to twist the knife just enough to make me feel like the worst person in the world for not doing things her way. But I wasn't going to give in. Not this time. Caleb noticed how I'd been spiraling, but he didn't push me to talk about it. He just gave me space, letting me process. I could see how much he hated seeing me like this, caught between my family's emotional blackmail and my desire to finally stand up for myself. It was a couple of days after that voicemail from my mom when Ella texted me again. This time, the message was cold and dismissive. You've really made your choice, haven't you? I don't know how you can be so selfish. Dad's health is declining, and you're making us all choose between you and him. This is all because of Caleb, isn't it? You're willing to ruin everything for a guy who's just going to let you down eventually. I don't get it. But fine, do whatever you want. I'm done trying to get through to you. At that point, I couldn't ignore the resentment in her words. It wasn't just about Caleb. It was about me. It was always about me. Ella had never really been on my side, and every time I tried to reach out to her, she'd somehow managed to turn it around and make me feel like I was the one to blame. I'd been patient with her for years, hoping that one day we could be close. But now, I could see that it was never going to happen. I stared at my phone, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, wanting to respond, to say something, anything that would make her understand. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't change anything. She had already made up her mind. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I posted another picture on social media, this time of Caleb and me at a small dinner we'd gone to the night before. We were holding hands, smiling, relaxed. I captioned it, to love and to trust, no matter the noise around us. I felt a sense of calm wash over me after posting it. I wasn't going to keep hiding. I wasn't going to let my family's guilt trip me into silence any longer. Caleb was my partner, and he was the one who supported me, the one who understood me. And no matter what my family said, no matter what they did, I wasn't going to let them take that away from me. But then, the calls started coming again. This time, it wasn't just my mom. My dad called, too. His voice was weak, and I could hear the fatigue in his breath as he spoke. Hannah, why don't you just let us be a part of your life? We've always been there for you, and this is how you repay us. I closed my eyes, trying not to cry. I didn't want to hear this. I didn't want to feel like I was tearing my family apart. But that's exactly what it felt like. It felt like I was the villain in my own story. But when I thought about it more, when I really examined it, I realized that this wasn't about me being selfish. This was about me standing up for myself, something I hadn't done in years. I felt my heart pounding as I held my phone in my hand, the screen lighting up with yet another call from my mom. I stared at the name for a moment, and then, instead of answering, I hit the ignore button. For once, I didn't feel guilty. I felt empowered. Caleb came over and sat next to me on the couch. "You don't have to do this alone," he said softly, his voice steady. I looked at him, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled. "I know," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "but I need to do this." The silence in the house after I turned off my phone was almost deafening. Caleb was beside me, but it felt like my family's words were echoing in my head, ringing louder than anything else. The guilt was still there, lurking in the back of my mind, but it wasn't as suffocating as before. It had started to shift into something else, something sharper, more defined. I had spent so many years waiting for my family's approval, giving them the power to dictate how I lived my life. But now, it felt like I was starting to take that power back. And, I'll admit, the thought of revenge, though I wasn't proud of it, began to take root. I knew the moment I posted that picture with Caleb, my family would come at me with everything they had. And sure enough, they didn't disappoint. The next morning, I checked my phone after a long night of ignoring it. There were more messages. My mom's voice still echoed in my mind, but this time it wasn't guilt I felt. It was a strange, cold determination. "This is your last chance to make things right. If you want to destroy your relationship with us, then fine. But you'll regret it when everything falls apart. We always warned you about Caleb. You never listened." I didn't reply, though the words stung. But I was done responding, at least for now. I needed to take a step back, breathe, and really think about what I wanted. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of knowing they still had this much control over me. It was around mid-morning when I got a message from Ella, the one from her that set everything in motion, the one that made my blood run cold. "You've really crossed a line, you know? I've been talking to Mom about this. You should know that this is going to be the last straw. We're done. You're on your own now. Don't even think about coming to Dad's birthday dinner next month. You won't be welcome." I felt a fire in my chest, but I didn't react immediately. I let the words sink in slowly. I knew what she was trying to do. She was trying to isolate me, push me away, make me feel like I had nowhere to turn. But she didn't realize one thing. I was done with being pushed around. I had been for a while, but now I was starting to see things clearly. This was a game, and they had no idea how it would end. I didn't respond to her either. Instead, I started thinking, not about how to fix things, not about how to make them understand, but about how to make them see just how wrong they were. I knew what I had to do. Over the next few days, I kept my distance. I went about my routine with Caleb, focusing on us and our plans for the future. I had already started planning the wedding in my mind, but there was something I knew I had to take care of first. I wasn't going to let my family ruin this for me. If they wanted to push me away, then I was going to give them exactly what they wanted, but on my terms. I started small at first. I gathered information. I reached out to a few of our mutual family friends, the ones who were still on good terms with both sides, asking questions, probing for any weaknesses, any little details that could be useful. It was Ella who had made the mistake of trying to shut me out completely. I knew her, maybe better than she realized. She had this thing about always being in control, about being the one who did things right in our family's eyes. She had the golden child complex, even though I never used that term anymore. I knew she'd never let me get the upper hand. So I began with something simple but effective. I started subtly talking to her friends. It wasn't hard. Ella had a few close friends who were always at our family gatherings. I reached out to one of them, a woman named Laura, who'd always seemed more genuine than the others. She was a little older, in her 30s, and though she was friendly with Ella, I knew there was tension between them. I played it cool, casually texting Laura a few times, making small talk about the beach trip and how things had been going with everyone. And when the opportunity came, I casually slipped in that I had noticed some tension between Ella and Caleb. "Oh, really? What happened?" Laura had asked. I played it off, just as I had planned. "Well, Ella's been kind of hard on him. She's always talking about how she thinks he's too quiet and not good enough for me. I don't know, maybe I'm overreacting, but it's getting old." Laura paused before texting back. "Ella's always been that way, you know. She thinks everyone should live up to her standards." I smiled. Laura was a bit of an open book. Now that I had planted that seed in her head, I could already hear it in my mind. She'd pass it on, maybe even tell a few others. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start shaking things up. Enough to make people question Ella's judgment, to make her look like the one stirring the pot instead of me. But I wasn't done yet. I knew Ella's biggest weakness, her need for approval. She craved it from Mom, from Dad, from everyone around her. She lived for the validation that came from being the perfect daughter, the one who always did things right. The problem with that? It made her blind to the cracks in the facade. A few days later, I planted another small detail, this time involving a conversation Ella had with Caleb. I made sure to bring it up during a family dinner, casually mentioning that Ella had said something funny the other day when we were talking. She said she didn't think Caleb would be around much longer. Like, she was certain you two wouldn't last. I didn't mention exactly when or where the conversation had happened. I just let it sit there, like a seed planted in a garden, ready to grow. And sure enough, the next time I saw my mom, she mentioned it. Why does Ella think Caleb isn't good enough for you? I mean, you're not going to listen to her, are you? I knew exactly what I was doing. I wasn't attacking them head on. No, I was letting them do the work themselves. I was making them doubt each other, making them second-guess their own words, their own judgments. Over the next few weeks, I executed my plan carefully. The subtle manipulations, the whispers of doubt, all slowly started to chip away at my family's foundation. What I had done was not dramatic or overt. It was much more insidious. I had let the seeds of distrust grow without their realizing it, and by the time they pieced it all together, it was too late for them to take it back. First, my mom called. I answered this time. Hannah, I don't understand what's going on. Why are you doing this? Why are you trying to destroy everything? Ella said, Caleb. I cut her off, my voice firm. You and Ella have made it perfectly clear how you feel about Caleb and me. I don't need to hear it anymore. You've made it clear I don't belong, that I'm just some disappointment to you. But I've had enough. I've been trying for years to make you proud, to make things work, but you've never accepted me as I am. And you know what? I'm done. I'm not going to beg for your approval anymore. There was silence on the other end. It was rare for me to stand up to her, but now it felt like a weight was lifted off my chest. The years of guilt and manipulation suddenly felt trivial. Well, I guess that's your choice, then, she said, her voice cold. But don't come crawling back when you realize how much you've lost. I hung up without a word. Ella, meanwhile, had started to unravel. Her need for control had turned against her. I kept talking to her friends, dropping little comments here and there. I wasn't trying to make her look bad. She was already doing that all on her own, but I wasn't going to stop it either. Her own words started to echo back to her. The little jabs about Caleb, the dismissive comments, they all started to catch up with her. Slowly, people began to notice. It was at Dad's birthday dinner, the one Ella had threatened me with, that everything truly fell apart. I had decided to attend, and I was met with a cold reception. Ella gave me nothing but icy glares, and Mom barely acknowledged me. But Caleb stood beside me, his quiet confidence unwavering. He didn't care what they thought, and that gave me strength. During the dinner, Ella let something slip. Mom, don't you think it's a little strange? That Hannah's always looking for validation from Caleb's side of the family now, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I could see my mom stiffen, but she didn't respond. That was the moment I realized Ella was unraveling. She was so desperate for control, so desperate to paint me as the villain, that she was beginning to lose the favor of even the family friends. They could see it now, her bitterness, her manipulations. And it wasn't long before whispers spread through the room. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Caleb and I just looked at each other, our silent understanding clear between us. We were done. This was our moment to break free. After dinner, I got a message from Ella that night, the kind that showed just how much things had shifted. You've ruined everything. I can't believe you did this to the family. You've pushed us away for good. I'm done. And don't bother trying to fix it. I smiled, but it wasn't a smile of victory. It was a smile of relief. This was the final proof that I had made the right decision. After that, I cut ties with them completely. While part of me will always carry the weight of that decision, I know I made the right choice. They pushed me to the edge, and I finally stood up for myself. But now, I can't help but wonder, was I too harsh? Did I go too far with the revenge? I'm still not sure. Maybe I'm the one who's in the wrong for cutting them off completely. But then again, after years of being manipulated, used, and made to feel like I was never good enough, I think I deserve peace.